Hey guys, every once in a while I have to repeat myself because I think we have some important information out there that gets lost in all the chaos and 9 years of Trump now, and we're exhausted and it's hard to keep on top of it. So I just want to review some things that I've talked about before. And some say it sounds like a conspiracy theory, and we don't do that, on our side. Well, it's not a conspiracy theory, and my way of thinking is this: in the era of Trump, if something doesn't smell right, you better go look at it because there's something off. There's something wrong. I want to remind you, in 2016, we now know from the bipartisan GOP-led Senate committee report that Russia did in fact interfere in our elections, and they favored Trump. They wanted Trump to defeat Hillary. That is not in question, even if Marco Rubio likes to conveniently forget such things. Okay, this happened. Okay, we forget about that. We also know that Paul Manafort, the Trump Putin guru, gave internal campaign polling data to Kalimnik. This is illegal. This is what Mueller found. He gave internal campaign polling data to Kalimnik, who is the same as giving it to Putin. Okay, so Putin knew where the vulnerable parts were, which states were vulnerable for Hillary, and they're tracking this. Now, why would they need to track it if they didn't have any intention of doing something? Okay, so we know this. Manafort, before the election, weeks before, met with Kalimnik at the Jared Kushner building in New York, the 666 building. Okay, there's a restaurant bar up there that actually a lot of Russians like to hang out at, and Rudy Giuliani spent a lot of time there. So, this sounds like a soap opera, but this is all true stuff. This happened. Okay, so that's where Manafort gave this to the Russians. Now, why would the Russians be interested in that? What would be their intentions? All right, fast forward to election night. All right, election night 2016. Now, every election, there is a media consortium that gets together and they do exit polling, secret exit polling. Now, the members of this media consortium are just obviously media. And the people who do this keep those results secret until 5 o'clock on election day, Eastern. Polls are still open. Okay. And even then, when they release it, it is only to the media members of that consortium. And it is supposed to be secret because it can affect voting. It can affect a lot of things. Well, here's what happened that night. At 5:01, Chris Blasto of ABC News, a very good friend of Dave Bossie, who is the deputy campaign manager for Trump at the time. And remember, he's Mr. Citizens United. He is the one who introduced Trump to Corey Lewandowski and Steve Bannon. And he is the Cambridge Analytica guy, very close to the Conways, and was instrumental in bringing Kellyanne onto the campaign. Okay. The Mercers, remember that? Oh, side note, Rebecca Mercer apparently dated Steve Bannon. So once you get past this ick factor, we'll settle down. I'll get to the nut of this in case you haven't heard all of this before. At 5:01, Chris Blasto calls Dave Bossie with the secret media consortium exit polling. Okay. He says, you guys are in for a rough night. Looks like you lost. And he told him where: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Are you starting to remember this? Okay. Dave Bossie goes and tells Trump, who looks at Melania and says, we lost. We think he was hoping he would. We all thought he would lose. Reince Priebus knew it. Obviously, Paul Manafort had this information. And I think it's clear that that information was then shared with Putin, with the Russians in real time. Now, stay with me. We know Manafort gave them secret internal campaign polling data before that. So I think it's safe to assume that if they'd exit polling at 5:01 p.m., while the polls were still open and people were still voting, they weren't just going to go, well, that would be wrong for us to use it. Come on, folks. We're not that naive. Over the course of the next few hours, the numbers changed to the point where just the right number, 77,000 votes, a mere 77,000 votes, perfectly and correctly distributed between those three battleground states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, showed up and gave Trump the Electoral College, even though Hillary Clinton had won the popular vote. All of this happened after 5:01 p.m. Eastern, when ABC News' Chris Blasto called Dave Bossie of the Trump campaign and told them that the exit polling showed they'd lost and in which states. We also know that there's a whistleblower who alleges that Karl Rove once told her that if a state is within 3% on election night, you can cheat undetected. What a precinct here, precinct there, a couple votes per precinct. Okay, put all this together, and I think we know what happened. I don't think this sounds like a conspiracy theory when you actually look at these facts. Now, maybe it didn't happen, maybe it did, but I think it's something to consider. I don't think that you can dismiss it out of hand. Chris Blasto, by the way, was not fired from ABC News. He was chastised and got a promotion. How about that? He was then up for the job of White House Communications Director for then President Trump. And that was, Dave Bossie was supposed to be facilitating that. It's what I understand is that Jason Miller wanted the job for himself. So, he knifed Blasto on that one. But this is clearly unethical, should be illegal. Well, a lot of it is illegal. But I've never been able to let that go. I've never been able to forget that on election night, 2016, at 5:01 p.m., the Trump campaign was given secret media consortium exit polling showing they'd lost and where. And then over the course of the next few hours, things went their way. But, when you hear people talk about those 77,000 votes, they had to be really distributed in such a careful way so that it didn't trigger a recount or a closer scrutiny, but it gave the electoral votes to Trump, even though he lost the national popular vote by 3 million votes. And Hillary was on track to win. The polls all had. Now, we knew those states were close, and I've heard people say, oh, well, Hillary should have gone in and campaigned there. Well, yeah, when it's that close. Hindsight is 2020, but she maybe had enough information to know that the results were supposed to be what Chris Blasto reported to the Trump campaign at 5:01 p.m. Eastern on election night when the polls were still open. I think it's something to consider. I wonder often if Hillary Clinton regrets not doing a recount, but in those days, we didn't do that. We accepted the results. Even if you knew there was probably some funny business, we accepted the results. But that's what I think happened. I think it's a real possibility. I've never been able to forget it because all those dots just get connected a little bit too easily. I think that there should be still an investigation into all of that. And I'd like to see the media really, really change their policy on the exit polling because they tend to know before the rest of us do who's won an election. And that night, it looked like Hillary had won until, again, that call at 5:01 p.m. on election night.